All right, what's going on YouTube? Thanks for tuning back in. And today's video is going to be on how to properly replace a wheel bearing kit on the rear of a Mark IV GTI. Now, the majority of subscribers, you already know me from all the Volkswagen Atlas videos that I put together. But today I'm going to mix it up a little bit because if you look right behind me, I got a whole bunch of parts that need to go on this Mark IV sooner than later. So we're going to start out with the wheel bearing kit. Just like any other video that I post, I'm going to show you what part I purchased. I'm going to show you what tools are required. And then last but not least, I'm going to show you from start to finish on how to properly install that. So with that being said, YouTube, let's get to it. Okay, for the wheel bearing kit, this is what I went with. I'll open it up just to show you what comes inside of it. So it has a dust cover, an axle nut, and then last but not least, the actual wheel bearing itself. The full kit, so you don't have to worry about pressing any kind of bearings in there or anything. It already comes fully assembled, so all you really have to do is just take the old one out and put the new one in. Okay, so these are at a minimum the tools that are required to commence to changing the wheel hub bearing kit on the rear of a Mark IV. The way I usually do this is I usually do the work first and then try to lay the tools all out so I can give you the exact amount of tools that are required for this. Because as you can see, there's a whole bunch right here. So if I did miss one as the video goes on, I will post a little link on the top right or top left or wherever I got room on the video, letting you know exactly what tool I'll be using at that time. So again, I went with a 1/2 inch air impact wrench, went with a 3/8 ratchet. You're gonna need a 30 millimeter socket, 12 point. Then you're gonna need a 17 millimeter. Again, this may vary depending what size for the lug bolts you have. Mine are 17 though. Yours should be also, unless you changed them or someone else changed them, you may have a 16 or 18. You're gonna need a 16 millimeter. I don't recall exactly if I needed a deep socket, but I think I wanted a deep socket because it was just easier to access. A 13 millimeter deep socket, regular 13 millimeter short. Little Allen key ones again, 8 millimeter, 5 millimeter, 4 millimeter, possibly a Phillips screwdriver, 15 millimeter wrench, a wire brush, a small flat tip screwdriver, some needle nose pliers, blue Loctite. Again, the only reason I'm using blue Loctite is just due to the fact that I did not replace all the bolts as the Bentley manual states, because some of these are stretch bolts, so I know bad on me. But for a backup, usually what I do, I use blue Loctite, torque it down to spec, and just give it just a little extra tug on it, but nothing too crazy. Bungee cord, breaker bar, just in case you do run into some stubborn bolts, brake parts cleaner, brake and caliper grease. I went with a 1/2 inch torque wrench. You don't need to have a 1/2 inch. You can have a smaller, but again, everything's torqued down to spec. So like I said, you can use a 3/8 or you can use a 1/2. Yes, you will need a hammer. I know it's kind of weird, like hammer on the vehicle, but yeah, you're gonna need a hammer. Then you're gonna need a spreader right here, or also known as a wheel bearing puller. And then maybe not, depending how new or old your calibers are or your brake pads, you may need to use a brake caliper piston tool to push those pistons back in on the calibers, as you will see later. But again, these are the minimal tools. If I did miss any tool, like I said, as the video goes step by step, I will show you exactly what tool I will be using if I missed it in here. But again, this is all you're gonna need. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to remove the wheel. Since I have pneumatic tools, I can do it while it's jacked up. But if you don't have pneumatic tools, just make sure the vehicle is on the ground, loosen up the lug bolts, then raise it, and then take the wheel completely off. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take those needle nose pliers and you're going to feed that cable through that actual little bracket on the left hand side and the caliber. Once you pull it out, you can just let it hang there. Now with a 15 millimeter wrench and a 13-meter socket, we're going to remove the bolts from the brake caliper housing while counter holding the guide pins. So since I missed this part, this should have been like the second step after taking off the brake cable. There's a retaining clip right there. Just take a flat tip screwdriver, small one, pop that out, and then feed that brake cable through that little hole right there. Now once you have taken that off, just take the bungee cords and just strap up the brake caliper so it's not just hanging loose and tearing up the brake lines. Once the brake caliper is put to the side, you can take the brake pads off. Next, you're going to take your 8 millimeter socket and loosen those two bolts off to take off the brake carrier. Now, this is one of the tools that I forgot to mention earlier, but with a chisel and a hammer, all you're going to do is you're going to remove that dust cap. Next, with the impact gun and the 30 millimeter 12-point socket, you're going to take off the axle nut. So now with that 4 millimeter Allen key socket, you're going to take that screw off, and that's going to enable you to take the rotor off. Now once the rotor is removed, you're going to take your 5 millimeter Allen key socket and you're going to loosen up the ABS sensor. Just one thing I want to throw out, you'll see here in a second, I had a hard time getting that out just due to the fact it was just so much dirt and grime in there. Take your time with this, because if you do break it, then you have to buy another one. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take the wheel hub puller, and I believe for my specific tool it was a 17 millimeter wrench. All you're going to do is you're going to tighten it up just as you see right now in the video, and then you're just going to just keep turning it until it pops out. Next, you're going to take your 16 millimeter deep socket and take those 4 bolts off that are holding the splash shield. Okay, so right there you still can see that there's an O-ring, and that's holding the stub axle still in the splash shield. So he's going to take some needle nose pliers, take that O-ring off, and that stub axle is going to come straight out. Okay, so next you're going to put the stub axle in a vise to hold it nice and tight. Then what I did, I cleaned the remainder grease off, the original grease that was on there, and then I took a chisel and a hammer to it and just slightly tapped it out, as you will see here in a second. Next thing I did, I just took some brake cleaner and cleaned some of the parts off, trying to get whatever dirt, grime, or rust may be there. Here I just used my wire brush on the bolts, trying to get the old blue Loctite off or whatever dirt or rust may have been in there. And then I used that blue Loctite and just put a small amount on each bolt. Before I reassembled the remaining of the parts, I kind of wiped down the splash shield and the stub axle. Alright, once everything is all nicely cleaned up, I took the stub axle and put that back to the splash guard, align it to the 4 holes, take the bolts with the blue Loctite, again because I didn't have those new bolts. I'm gonna just hand tighten them down, and then once they hand tighten them down, I used a crisscross pattern to torque those down to 44 foot-pounds. Now before I reassembled, I used some brake parts cleaner just to clean the stub axle. After I cleaned the stub axle, I used some all-purpose grease to make the installation a little bit easier on the stub axle itself and on the wheel hub unit. So after messing around for a little bit, it finally got on there. Then I took the nut, the self-locking nut, hand tightened it on there, and then used my impact wrench to tighten it down. After I tightened it down, I did take my torque wrench though and ensured it was torqued down to the spec. And what it gives via the Bentley manual, it says 129 foot-pounds. Next, you're going to take the dust cover or dust cap, however you like to call it. You're going to line it up and just slightly tap it in there. Next, you're going to take the rotor and you're going to put that on the wheel hub. And then you're going to take your screw, depending if it's Phillips or it's an Allen key. I think mine were Allen key. And I had to use a 4mm Allen key socket to tighten that down. It specifies in the Bentley manual that it has to be 35" per pound, but all I usually do with these is just a nice hand tight. Next, it's going to be a little bit all over the place, so I apologize. But once I removed the guide pins, I cleaned the brake carrier and the brake caliper thoroughly. Once that was clean, I took the guide pins, put some more grease on it, and reinserted those back into the brake carrier. Next, I took a wire brush and I cleaned off the rust and whatever debris were on the two bolts that hold the brake carrier in place. Once I did that, I used some blue Loctite, just like with the other bolts. Applied a small amount on the actual bolt, and then tightened the two bolts that hold the carrier pin in place at 48 foot-pounds. Once that was done, I took the grease and applied it on the respective grease points as the Bentley manual states. Next, I took a wire brush and I cleaned off the retaining springs that go into the brake carrier. Once those were cleaned off, I also applied a small amount of grease on there just to ensure once the brake pad's on there, I don't get any kind of squeaking noise. Next, I took both brake pads and installed them into the brake carrier. Next, you're going to have to take the brake caliper tool set and then you're going to have to push that piston in all the way to actually get that brake caliper over those two brake pads. Now once the tool is in place, I had to take a 22mm wrench to hold it in place and then keep screwing it until that piston was all the way back in the home position. So once the brake piston is in the home position as it is right now, there's a couple things that I did. First, I put the brake caliper on the actual brake pads. There's two little springs on each brake pad. Just make sure they're underneath the actual brake caliper. Then I took the bolts that's going to tighten this brake caliper down, and I used a wire brush, clean them off again, just trying to get whatever residue rust is on there. and then I use blue Loctite. And then once I put the blue Loctite on there, it's the same procedure as taking it off. You're gonna counter hold the guide pins with the 15mm wrench, and then with a 13mm socket, you're gonna torque those bolts down to 26 foot-pounds. So next thing I did, I took some electrical cleaner, cleaned off the ABS sensor. Once I cleaned that, I put it back in the hole and then tightened that bolt down about hand tight. After I did that, I also ensured that I reconnected it so I wouldn't get a warning light in my cluster. Next thing, just in reverse order, you're going to take that brake cable, you're going to feed it through that little hole in that bracket, and then you're just going to pull up on the cable and feed it through until it gets into the bracket where it holds it in place. After that, you're going to take the retaining clip and you're going to put it back into place. Now, since I'm running wheel spacers, you can kind of skip this step. Just kind of kept this in the footage because this is where I put my wheels back on. But either way, all you're gonna do now is just pretty much put the wheel back on, hand tighten the wheel bolts back into the hub. Then after that, what I usually do is I take a ratchet, just kind of tighten them down a little bit more before I lower the vehicle. And then once the vehicle is lowered, I will torque those wheel bolts to spec.